Talk About with John Twig is brought to you in part by Brian Shaw with Mackey Research Capital in Campbell River, offering portfolio management, investment planning, and insurance products.
Hi, welcome to Talk About. My name is John Twig. The guest today is Morgan Ostler, a very interesting person in Campbell River. Morgan, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, John. Pleased to be here.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about. You've had an interesting life, as they say. Can you give us a brief... no, you can't.
It's not going to be brief.
Yeah, but you were born in Victoria.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate that my father had chosen Vancouver Island as the place to come after living most of his life in India and serving in the Indian Army, based in Campbell and at the Khyber Pass, and often talked
Brit,
about
though.
that area. Yeah, he was Anglo-Irish, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, with an English background from the centuries before.
Yeah.
But we lived in Victoria. He farmed there. He was quite elderly, actually. He was in his 60s when he came to Canada. My sisters and I were born there, and he was quite elderly, actually, four little girls in a row, which under the British tradition, we were sent off to St. Anne's Academy, where we remained in residence until we were around 11, and then we went as day girls.
Did you get out for the summer, or was it?
Yeah, we came home for the summer, but we didn't see them very often during the year.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, St. Anne's is kind of downtown now.
It is.
And then the family farm would have been out.
But about 5 miles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but under the tradition of putting the children in school.
Yeah.
And when my father had gone to school himself, he was a little boy at 5, and he was sent to Westward Ho, which was the preparatory school for Sandhurst, and he was 5 and went there and came home at Christmas and in the summer.
Yeah.
And so he really saw it as a normal.
Yeah.
It wasn't out of unkindness, and the discipline of being in the academy probably helped us, but I often feel we missed a lot of childhood.
Yeah. So you grew up in Victoria, and you got some education there.
Mm-hmm, did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you went back to UVic and political science in your 50s.
Yeah.
But that was after...
the kids, after the children, my children and my stepchildren had all gone from home, I decided, and my late husband, Bob Ostler, was mayor at the time, and he was extremely busy in office, and I decided that I would head off back down to Victoria and take a year of political science and English. And
Yeah, but you came to Campbell River as a journalist in what year was that?
Well, that would be 1964.
Right.
I came to Campbell River. Actually, my first husband came as editor of the North Island paper. And then he and I separated, and he went to Toronto to an opportunity there, but I wouldn't leave the island, and I remained in Campbell River. And Bickles, who owned the papers at that time, offered me a job as a reporter. Well, I had 2 little children to look after, and that was important. And then eventually, in about 6 months' time, I was made editor of the paper.
Yeah. Was that
So
the Courier at the end?
It was the Islander.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And during that period of time, I was very fortunate because I won a Canadian newspaper award for a story I had written on Chief Jimmy King, famous First Nations carver, who was a great character in the community. And I had a lot of breaks. I also had a chance to go to Cuba for 3 weeks.
Is this during the Castro?
Yeah, it was. 1968. I got a press pass from Maclean's magazine to go, and a friend of mine who's an astrophysicist and was doing some work down there went down with me at that time, and I had a chance to see many of the impact that Canada had on Cuba, and wrote stories about that, such as the Saskatchewan farming community sent a prize-winning black bull down to Cuba. And that bull managed to inseminate the cattle, which were called Yubo cattle, very wretched, skinny-looking creatures that produced 1 gallon of milk a day. And when the black velvet, the particular bull, had finished his job, those cows were producing 4 quarts a day in the next generations, of course. The same thing with the turkeys. So I went out and did some stories on them. Yeah. And I did get a chance to go to Hemingway's house and go in and take interior pictures and talk to his stepson. Yeah. And it was grand.
Where did you get politicized?
Well, my father was a very, very active in community. He did farm our land in rather a grand way at Royal Oak. He, because of the crash of the bulb market in Holland during the war, he and Van Treit, who's a well-known farmer in the area, decided to form the Vancouver Island Bulb Growers Association. Yeah. And they both went into bulbs and did mostly tulips and daffodils, and did very well through those war years. And we had fields and fields of those wonderful flowers, a great memory for me. But at the same time, he was very interested in the formation of a new political party, which at the time was considered rather unusual, the Social Credit Party. It was unusual in that they had, through Major Douglas, who was the founder of that concept, he was an Englishman, that there would be a fund that would be available to stimulate the community by giving each person in the
that would have been late 1940s, early 1950s.
Yeah, and earlier than that, actually. Yeah, he and Major Jukes put together this party.
Oh, okay.
So anyways, that was quite stimulating for me at that time. I was quite small and I wasn't allowed to go to the meetings which were held in the house, but I put a big basket under the long dining room table and I would climb into the basket. When the meeting started, I would hear the whole plan.
Did you have a notebook and take notes as a journalist yet? No, okay.
But I got hooked on that. Yeah.
Anyway, you came up to Campbell River, and obviously you've really liked it because you've stayed. And
I not only liked it, I loved it.
Yeah.
51 years later, I love Campbell River.
Yeah.
I had it had a sort of an aura to me, Campbell River and the John Hart Dam and what was going on up here. It intrigued me even as a young person. Yeah. So when I had the chance to come up here, that I was extremely pleased. Yeah. And I still think
I think we're pretty pleased to have you too, because you do a lot of stuff. We're going to get to some of the stuff. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of it, but you served on council for 2 terms. That would be 2002 to 2008.
Yeah.
How? Why did you not keep doing it, or did you get defeated? Or?
Well, when I retired at the end of my 2nd term, I was 75. And I was rather taken back when I was at one of the UBCM meetings to discover that I was probably the oldest woman in British Columbia that was serving on council, or perhaps tied with someone else. They weren't sure. Yeah. But I looked around and realized that at 75, I still had a lot of things to do, and I don't think I was very effective as a councillor, except my focus was on protecting the access to the waterfront, to protect it from industrial development.
You know, people marvel today, tourists coming here. You can drive from Willow Point to downtown and it's almost all waterfront.
Yeah. I will have to give credit to my late husband, Bob Ostler, for that, and his council, because they put together a waterfront development plan, which still is in effect today. It created a fund from development costs from contractors, DCCs was the initial fund, and the plan was to buy back each of the houses along the waterfront from Willow Point into Campbell River. Now, if you remember, in the old days, the waterfront had plenty of little shacks along it. It was quite charming, but it cuts one off from access to the beach. And as they had the opportunity and these little places came on the market. They were purchased at market price.
Yeah.
And one by one, they've been removed. I think the last major piece to be removed was Dr. Miller's double wide at Frank James Park.
Well, I happen to know the city bought another lot last year.
Yeah.
But the house on it is still there. But yeah, but it's a very good thing.
In some cases, they have left people in houses where they are leased out now.
Yeah.
Until some point at which they're ready to develop that part of the waterfront.
Yeah.
But the really important piece was at the Sybil Morgan Andrews Park area, or Frank James, really, and her property.
Yeah.
And when that was pulled out, that gave us that wonderful sweeping view of the water line from entrance to the community.
What's the origin of Robert Ostler Park? How did that come about?
Well, that was interesting. I was a reporter at the time, back in 1966, when Skip MacDonald was the mayor. And at that time, that park was made up of the dredging material that had come out of the area further along the waterfront that created the deep port for the Quadra Island Campbell River Ferry. Huh. So that was all dredged material that was stumped over in that. That was a very deep loop in there that used to be full of logs in a southeaster. Yeah. It captured everything that came up the passage. It was amazing to see what it would look like. Yeah. So when they filled it in, that solved that problem. Yeah. But after filling it in, it took some time for the final development of it. And now, today, there's of course a new opportunity there for Campbell River people to be able to walk onto the beach, because they're doing a soft shore development in order to walk on the sandy beach. Yeah. I'm really interested in the fact that we are going to have a sandy beach downtown, but we already have one around the back of the Maritime Heritage Center.
Oh, yes.
And we call it the Pocket Park.
Yes.
And that Pocket Park is gradually infilling with sand every year. And if you drive along the waterfront to Oyster Bay, you notice that there's pockets of sand that were never there before. Yeah. At the same time, Parksville has been bemoaning the fact that they're losing their sand. Yeah. And I'm thinking...
Well, I used to live on the water down at Oyster Bay, and that tide, when it comes, it's a strong tide. Yeah. And it carries a lot of stuff with it. And in fact, I watched some logs. I was at the Maritime Heritage Center a while ago, and it was a windy day and the tide was running, and they had some driftwood out there. It was, I don't know, I'm not good on nautical speed, but I mean, you know, it was moving along. Yeah. So I can see that it washes the sand. It's definitely.
And there was other factors down there as well. They removed those freighters that had been sunk
the
around
breakwater for the logging
show. Yeah, and when they removed that, I think it allowed a lot of the sand to shift.
Yes, it's still shifting
as well.
Too. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, time is flying. I want to get into, I guess, is broom bashing one of your top priorities these days?
Well, broom bashing only happens during usually 5 or 6 weeks of the year. Yeah. That's when the broom is in bloom.
And the yellow flowers.
Yeah, and the process behind this is that you cut the broom when it's in bloom, because that's the time at which the plants the roots are the weakest, because all the energy goes into the flowers themselves. If you cut it off at ground level, that broom will not return. Yeah. And we have been able to confirm that through the 4 years that we've been doing the Broom Bash during that period, because we have South Dogwood used to be thick with broom on either side, and that was one of the first areas that we developed. Yeah. And you'll see now that there's absolutely no broom on either side, and it hasn't returned.
Yes, yeah, it's good. So how are we doing? How did we do this year?
Well, the mission, when Carol Coutier and I were really impressed by what the founder of Broom Busters, Joanne Sales, had done in Qualicum, where she lives. They had formed a Broom Busters organization there, which is now a society with a board of directors and some funding from the province. And they have had a huge impact on Vancouver Island communities. Presently, not only Campbell River is involved in broom busting, but Courtney, Cumberland, and Qualicum, Parksville, Nanaimo, and Duncan are now all members of Broom Busters.
Yeah.
And so our mission when we started was to remove all the broom from the major entrances. That would be the waterfront, Dogwood, South Dogwood, and then the Jubilee Parkway.
Yeah.
Well, we've achieved South Dogwood and all the way across the bridge up to about a mile past the Silver Bridge.
Yeah.
The only broom that you'll see on the highway there is on private land. And we're not allowed to remove broom on private land unless people ask us, or we sneak in and do it.
I know somebody who sneaked in and done it. It's not her. She might have, but I don't know that.
Actually, our and the Rotary Club have been fantastic. They have been helping us with Jubilee Parkway because that is very difficult. Yeah. So we've essentially removed the broom from all the areas
that
get the
were
part of our mission statement.
Involved.
That's right. It was interesting that a couple of weeks ago when John Horgan was up here, and he's the leader of the opposition in the House.
Yeah, he was on the show.
Yeah, he drove up with his aide from Victoria in the car, and he was astonished at the amount of broom on the highway. He said it was like a yellow tunnel all the way up from Courtney.
Yeah.
And
think of the jobs we could create. I mean, it's a narrow window of about a month, maybe 6 weeks, where it's the right time to do it. But I know they did some of that on the Jubilee Parkway several years ago. I got photos of it. And I think they had people on day passes from a jail that were doing it that day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there has occasionally been patches removed, which we didn't do, and I think, I wonder who's doing that.
Yeah. Oh, it was prisoners on work experience.
Yeah, well, broom is now found, it's a toxic plant. You can't even burn it. If it's burnt, it releases toxins into the air.
Okay.
So it has to be ground up if you're going to get rid of the bushes themselves.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
So the seeds are toxic, and it's an invasive species.
Yeah, but if it was changed to a toxic species, that would require that the provincial government begin to fund it. As long as it's invasive, it fits in another category.
Okay.
Yeah, there has been much lobbying to change the category.
Yeah.
But you can see why they think twice about it.
Yeah.
Now, that broom, according to friends of mine that have done a motorcycle trip to Los Angeles, is the broom is now rampant through Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. So it is not only here. In fact, if you look online at what Oregon has had to deal with, they've spent $47 million in the removal of broom, but also those costs are the degradation of land, etc. That's part of that $47 million. And that was just in 1 year.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing battle.
And the origin was some Scottish guy down in Victoria who was homesick, and he brought it over.
Well, maybe.
That's not proven, eh? I've heard that
Yeah,
story.
I know, I have too.
But
he apparently lived in Machosen at Souk, around the Souk area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he brought it. But other areas claim they have the lore around it.
Okay.
So
all right.
It works for us on Vancouver Island to blame a Scotchman.
Yeah. Urban agriculture or Campbellton? Which one do you want to deal with?
Well, for years I had a column in the paper which I really enjoyed writing, Urban Gardener, and I wrote on issues around the basic gardening for people who hadn't gardened before. I realized that there has, through what was happening on Vancouver Island with limited food access and so on, it was proven, I think, at Christmas time one year when
there was a big snowstorm.
There was a snowstorm, and in 3 days' time, as there was no trucks getting through, the shelves in Campbell River were empty, and that's what twigged me to think we have to learn to become sustainable or self-sufficient in food.
Yeah.
And in a community that's really based on resources as mining, fishing, and logging, there were very few people who had even backyard gardens because they're so accustomed to the easy access to food. but it would leave us very vulnerable. And so that was really in the back of my mind as I started to encourage people to begin to grow plants on their deck or in pots or in raised beds or whatever. And I sprinkled those columns with ways to prepare the food.
Awesome.
And also that led into my chairing the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So presently we have some excellent bylaws on food development in the community.
I think where the Sustainable Official Community Plan has a goal of, and I can't remember the exact percent, was it 10% or 30% local food by, 10% by 2030, something like that? And we're at 3% right now?
Well, stretching it, if it was 3%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vancouver Island, despite the fact that we have a lot of agriculture going on at the moment, the estimate is that we're 10% food secure.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when we grew up in Victoria, the stats that I have found show that we were around 57% food secure. Huh. So we have a long way to go.
Yeah. You know, the first European settlement on Vancouver Island was a Spanish farm in behind Port Alberni.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then, of course, when Douglas and the Brits were down in Victoria, there's pretty good climate there, so that was actually a food basket as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're just about out of time. Is there something we haven't touched on you want to mention? Campbellton.
Well, Campbellton.
The Campbellton Neighborhood Association is, what, 4 years old now? You were one of the founders, I think.
Yes, I was. Yeah. Carol Coutier and I. Yeah. We're sort of the beautification police of Campbellton.
Those flower boxes that some of them need maintenance.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they'd be rather neglected. Yeah. But I think there's a better plan for them than the wooden flower boxes coming along. Oh, so with Brian Shaw and a few other people in Campbellton, and yourself included, the Neighborhood Association was formed. Part of what stimulated me to want to be involved is that Campbellton is the main entrance into the Campbell River. Yeah. And it was a very shabby looking entrance, very grubby. The sidewalks often had a lot of weeds and that growing up in the cracks. Yeah. The appearance of the stores in front was had deteriorated, and we needed to pull an organization together and raise the profile of the importance of Campbellton. Historically, it's an important area. It's got a wonderful, rich history. Yeah. It's got a river, one of the great rivers, a world-class river that runs by it. And yet, if you're in the downtown of Campbellton, you have no awareness at all that you're beside that a marvelous river.
Well, river access is one of the CNA's priorities right now.
Yeah, river access is so important, and it's. We've certainly raised the spirit of Campbellton because the people are upgrading their houses, stores are being painted, people are beginning to see the importance of Campbellton in relationship to Campbell River itself.
That's a good opportunity for me to put in a plug. I'm still active with the CNA, I'm not on the board, but we're planning some events for Monday, August the 1st, which happens to be BC Day. And in the morning, if plans come to fruition, we're going to have a talk fest from 10 till noon. I think at the Fusilier Grill, which the new location on the river has this beautiful water front. Yeah, really. And then from noon till we don't know when, we're going to have an event in the community garden, which is on 15th near Peterson. And that's the Campbellton Neighborhood Garden, Campbellton Community Garden, which the Campbellton Neighborhood Association lobbied and got and volunteered. So if you're interested in Campbellton, do put that on your calendar.
Of course I will.
We'd like to see you there too.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, the guest has been Morgan Ostler, one of Campbell River's most distinguished citizens, I think. And you've done a lot of good work, and we thank you for that. If you'd like to watch the interview again, we have a YouTube channel. It's Shaw TV North Island. And I'd like to thank Lance and Valerie, both for making efforts to come in and work cameras today. Laura wasn't available. And thank you, Gord, for directing too. So there's Talk About on Shaw TV North Island. Thanks for watching. Oh, and thank you, Brian Shaw, for sponsoring Talk About too.
Talk About with John Twig is brought to you in part by Brian Shaw with Mackey Research Capital in Campbell River, offering portfolio management, investment planning, and insurance products.